This is Software Engineering Radio, the podcast for professional developers, on the web at se-radio.net. SE Radio brings you relevant and detailed discussions of software engineering topics at least once a month. SE Radio is brought to you by IEEE Software Magazine, online at computer.org/software.
Hello, or Software Engineering Radio. This is Robert Blumen. Today, this will be a different kind of episode. There have been a lot of changes in this show over the last 2 years. Instead of bringing you a normal show, I wanted to take some time to tell you where we've been and where we're going. Later on in the episode, I will be talking to members of the team who produce the shows and the people behind the scenes who help put it online. I will do my section as a monologue, and the others will be interviews. And if you don't like this show, don't worry, because next time we'll be back to our regular format. I'm going to start by talking about the history of the show. The show was founded in 2006. We're now well into our 10th year, which is really old for a podcast. There was hardly anything going on in the podcast world in 2006. By the time that you listen to this, we will have published over 230 shows. The show was started by Markus Wolter, a computer science researcher and practitioner in Germany. The show was, at the time, probably the first podcast dealing with software engineering topics. One of our hosts told me that he had declined the invitation to get involved with the show because he didn't really expect podcasting would ever take off, but he did eventually join. The show started and has always been a volunteer project, very much like an open source project. Marcus and the founders continued to run the show completely volunteer until February of 2012. That time, Marcus handed the show over to the IEEE Computer Society under the umbrella of the Society's print magazine known as Software. The magazine itself has recently gone all digital, and it continues to be the sponsor of the show. The show hosts are still all volunteer, but we have employees at the IEEE Computer Society who spend some of their time on the publishing side to get the show edited and uploaded to the web. I got involved with the show in 2010. My very first episode was number 157 on Hadoop with Philip Zeiliger. The way this came about is my friend Charles Anderson, who is now a show host, told me about the show, how great it was, and he recommended that I listen to it. I started browsing through the website, and there were dozens or 100 or more episodes that I wanted to listen to. I downloaded many episodes onto my huge portable media player that had a hard drive, and I spent maybe a year listening to episodes in the back catalog. I have not listened to every single episode, but I have listened to everyone since mid-2009 and about 85% of the ones, maybe 90% of the ones before that. On one of the episodes, they asked for volunteers. I responded. I did a test show, which was accepted, and I became a host. Being a host, it's been a lot of fun, and that's why I'm still doing it now after several years. I like producing content. I like educating people. And one of the great things you get about being a host is you get to talk to all these experts about things and ask them whatever you want to know, which there's really no other way to do that other than being in media. The show has made a difference for me in my career, and I hope that it has for the listeners as well. One of the principles established by Marcus is every episode should combine specifics about a particular topic along with some general permanent computer science or software engineering concepts. We are not trying to be the show about what happened in the last 5 or 10 minutes. We're trying to create content that will be useful for people even years in the future, and even to some extent if people stopped using a particular technology that was featured in the show. We want people to listen to the new episodes, but I encourage listeners to go back and do as I did, listen to the back catalog. We, on the show, take a lot of pride in how relevant the episodes are even years after they're published. We look at download statistics from one of the services in our publication platform, showing usually about 15,000 downloads a day that an episode is published, and then about 1,000 or 2,000 more per month for several years after that. We think that the surge on the date of publication is subscriptions people have through RSS, iTunes, or services like that, and that those shows may be auto-downloaded. But we think the ones coming from months or years later are search results or links that people forward around. It can take us several years to even really have a good idea how well a particular show did. The first thing we do on an episode is to give a biography of the guest. I'm going to do that for you right now. I started out in physics. I got my bachelor's degree at Stanford University, and then I got a master's in engineering at the University of California in Berkeley. My first job was computer programming for telco, and I liked it, so I stayed in the same field. And this has been my career for over 20 years now. The field has changed so much for the better over that time. I wish I had all the tools that we have now when I got out of school. Right now, I am employed as a software engineer in a DevOps at Salesforce in San Francisco. Now, more about the show. When the IEEE Computer Society took over the show, it was expected that many editors within the IEEE would want to produce shows, but for the most part, that has not happened. In April of 2014, Forrest, Shawl, who was at the time the editor of Software Magazine, recognized that the show needed someone to really drive it forward and asked me to become the show editor, which I have been doing for over 1 year now. I will be talking to Forrest later in this episode. Right now, I'll talk about what I am trying to do as the show editor. First and foremost, I want to continue the show as it has been, which is a great show about hardcore technology and software engineering. The founders of the show created a great format and left us this fantastic legacy, and I hope that we can continue to live up to that and just keep it the way it is. The 50,000 downloads that we get for an episode, that's a pretty big number for a really specialized niche topic, and it's a high bar for us to live up to who are now running the show. Since I became the show editor, we've added a number of hosts. When I started, there were 3 active hosts, and now we have 9, which include myself, Everhard Wolf, Jeff Meyerson, Tobias Kotz, Johannes Tönnes, Stefan Tilkov, Charles Anderson, Josh Long, and Sven Johann. Some of those had done podcasts before, but not for this show. Well, others were completely new to podcasting. 2 of the hosts, Stefan and Sven, have been guests on the show before becoming hosts. After adding hosts, I've been focusing on organizational improvements. To get the new hosts trained on how to do an episode, I created a manual. We are going to be open sourcing the show host manual sometime this year. The manual provides detailed instructions on how we create an episode. I have shown it to some people in the publications and media field and gotten some feedback. We hope that others in the podcasting and technical publications area will also find it useful. There will be an announcement on the show or the blog or somewhere, Twitter, when this happens. Next, I'm going to say a bit about how we do an episode. The first step is someone comes up with an idea, or maybe a guest, or both. Whichever one, then you need the other. You need a topic and a guest. So we ask the guest if he or she will come on. And when the guest agrees, then we start working on show development. Some of the topics come from me, but I can really only suggest the topics. If a host likes the topic, he will do it. If the host has a better idea, he'll go with his own topic. Once we have the topic and the guest, the host writes an outline. And this is where most of the work comes in. If the host is not already an expert on the topic, and most of us are not experts on most of the things we do shows about, because that would be too many things for any one person to be an expert on, then the host has to learn something about the topic. We're not trying to become experts, but you need to know enough to have an intelligent discussion with the guest who is an expert. Then we go through a collaborative editing process. The host puts his outline up on a Google Doc, and all the hosts have the chance to review and comment on it. Once that gets revised and finalized, then we're ready to record the interview. There's a ton of stuff we've all been learning about how to make a good recording. Overall, the standards in the podcast space are constantly rising. Audio quality is overall across podcasts higher now than it's ever been. We will not ever have studio quality audio for every show unless barring some improvements in technology, because most of our shows are recorded over the internet. We have had poor audio quality on some shows, and we are working to get up to at least adequate quality on every show through a combination of hardware, software configuration, and processing improvements. We do recognize that a lot of people listen while they're on the bus, outside doing chores, and there needs to be a decent, clear signal without a lot of noise so that people can listen to the show. Now, when it comes to doing the interview, the host goes into the interview with an outline, but the outline is not a completely fixed structure. It gives you an idea of what you're going to talk about. It gives you a map of where you want to go, but things never go exactly the way you've outlined, and that's often for a good reason, which is the guest maybe says something that's more interesting than what you were going to ask. And I encourage hosts, if the guest says something interesting, then go with that. And you always have the outline to fall back on if you need to know what your next question is. So there's no perfect balance between the planned and unplanned content. That's part of the art of being a host, is when to go off the map and when to get back on it. The time management aspect is also very important. You, the listener, have given us an hour of your time, and we want to use that hour very well. We can't cover everything there is to know about a topic in an hour. So the host has to think about what is really the most important part of this topic. What do I want to ensure that I cover within 1 hour? It's okay to change your mind if something better comes along, but definitely by the end of the hour, you should have covered all of the things that you think are important and give the guests some time to talk about where to learn more. A lot of our interviews are recorded on Skype. Some of them are in person, but quite often the host and guests have no way to be in the same place at the same time, and sometimes are on different continents. Johannes produced an episode number 215 with the hosts and guests on 3 different continents. That was quite a miracle of time management and scheduling. In the early years, the VoIP technology was not reliable enough to use for recording shows, so we did record them all in person on pretty high quality gear. As VoIP has become more reliable, we are doing more and more shows on Skype, which is great from an access standpoint. It allows us to talk to people we could never otherwise talk to, but the audio quality is definitely lower on Skype than, at the present time, lower on Skype than it is face-to-face with professional gear. We are watching some technologies that are not ready for production yet that are trying to solve this problem, and we will follow that space with great interest. Once episode is recorded, the show writes some show notes, links, and we hand it off to the media production team at the Computer Society. Brian Brannon, who I will be speaking to later, manages that part of the process. The group of people who do audio editing and publications clean up the audio, do the leveling, format it down, mix it to mono, and put it up to the website. Having this type of professional support has been a huge benefit for this show. When I first joined, I had to spend several hours editing each show, and we had volunteers who did the publication. Having a group of people that do all this has made it possible for the host to really focus on producing content, which is what we're good at. And it reduces the learning curve of learning about audio technology in order to become a content producer. After we publish an episode, we all discuss the show among the hosts. The members of the team, other than the host, give the host feedback on what we liked, what we didn't, and what could have been better. We're all trying to learn as a team and grow and become better show producers. And who better to give us feedback than other show producers? Historically, we've averaged about 2 shows per month over the 10 years. In 2013 and the first half of 2014, the publication frequency dropped to about 1 per month. And since I came on and added new hosts, we're back up to a little bit more than 2 per month. As we close out 2015 in the second half of the year, we plan to increase publication frequency in the range of 3 to 4 per month. In the second half of 2015, I may add 1 more show host. If this is something you're interested in, then please reach out to me by email or Twitter or on LinkedIn. In 2016, if we can get everything working, we would like to go to a weekly show, and that would be my goal, for us to publish weekly throughout 2016. Like anything else, a podcast needs to grow and change. The current team wants to keep bringing you great shows about some of our traditional areas like programming languages, databases, and operating systems. We also want to branch out, and this is not totally new for the show, but we want to do a bit more on career and cultural aspects of the software engineering field. We had 2 great episodes of 2014 with Tobias talking to Randy Shoup about job interviews and company culture. We have some other show ideas about career strategies and related areas. If you have any ideas, please feel free to suggest them to us on any of our media channels. Last year, I started writing a column about a single episode of the show for the IEEE Computer Society's software magazine. The column contains a 2,000-word excerpt from the transcript of one of the episodes, which is about 10 minutes of airtime. The column used to be available only to subscribers of the print edition, but it is now outside the paywall. The magazine has gone all digital. The magazine is published 6 times per year. For the magazine column episodes, we will publish the entire transcript on our blog. We'd love to publish transcripts of every episode, but we are currently not able to do that. That's something that I'm hoping we'll find a way to accomplish maybe next year. If anyone has ideas about transcripts also, please contact me. Another big goal for us starting this year has been to reach out and engage the listeners, that's you, more than we have in the past. Until recently, there were 3 channels for reaching us: email, comments on our blog, and writing a review on iTunes. The email address was broken for a while when we switched hosts, but that's working again, and it is team@se-radio.net. iTunes reviews still work, but that has not been very popular with listeners. Very few people have chosen that format. So we are trying other channels. We're now active on all of the major social networks. Our Twitter handle is @SCRadio, no dash. You can follow us there. You can retweet, favorite, or direct message us. Jeff Meyerson is running a Facebook page, which is called Software Engineering Radio. Be sure to look for the Facebook page, not the Facebook group. There is a defunct Facebook group called Software Engineering Radio. Tobias is leading our group on Google Plus by the same name. I organize a group on LinkedIn with the same exact name as well. You can find us on any of these sites or groups by searching for Software Engineering Radio. Please follow us on any of these platforms and use them to communicate with us. Starting with show 218 this year, we pre-announce the upcoming episodes on these social platforms. Another small change in our messaging is the new logo. This was designed for us by Shopi Masavar Ramani, and we're using it on all of our properties to have a consistent graphical image. We would love to hear from you, the listeners. Tell us how we're doing. What did you like and not like about a single episode or the show in general? We promise to read everything and to respond if you ask a question or want a response. You can also reach out to individual hosts who are all over the web on different social networks. You can find our individual contact details on the team page on the website se-radio.net. And now I am going to wrap up my part of the show. You will next hear an interview that I have done with each one of the hosts and the management team. I'm going to start with an interview that I recorded in mid-2014 with Marcus Volter. I had planned to do this episode sometime in 2014, soon after that recording, but things happened and I had to deal with other things, get hosts onboarded, so I decided to wait. So this interview is about a year old, but I wanted you to hear it anyway. Just keep in mind it's slightly dated. Hope that you like this episode, and all of us hope to hear from you. For Software Engineering Radio, this has been Robert Blumen. I am now joined by Marcus Volter. For longtime listeners, Marcus needs no introduction. For those of you who joined more recently, Marcus was the founder of the program and was involved in over 120 episodes. Marcus, welcome back to Software Engineering Radio.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me.
I think people would like to know, how did the show get started?
Well, it's a long time ago. It was in 2006, so I'm not 100% sure. But what I do remember is that I started listening to podcast Security Now, This Week in Tech, legal apport stuff. And I was thinking that this podcast thing is great and that I would like to listen to some really interesting software engineering stuff. And I looked through iTunes and other places and I didn't find anything. And so then I thought, well, if there isn't anything, then I need to create it. And so then I talked to a couple of friends, Martin Lippert, Everhard Wolf, Alexander Schmid. I think that was the core group. I probably missed somebody. Sorry for that. And they agreed to join, and then we started. I guess that was the story.
In your time doing the show, which now has over 200 episodes, do any memories stand out?
What really does stand out is I go to a lot of conferences and present tutorials and stuff like that. And for a time, I always took my recording gear so I can interview people at these conferences. And so I do remember frantically looking for quiet spots and talking to the organizers in advance and trying to find rooms and organize rooms and trying to find people. So that was quite intense. I didn't see much of the rest of the conference because I spent most of the time interviewing people. And I do remember that one of my favorite episodes was with Dick Gabriel on Lisp. That was one of these conference recordings. So that was a lot of fun. But many others were fun as well, but I don't remember. It's a while ago.
What podcasts do you listen to now?
It's a long list. So I still listen to Security Now. I still listen to some of the other Twit podcasts. I do listen to a couple of German podcasts, some on science. There is a few nice science podcasts. I do listen to a few aviation podcasts. There are a few interesting American or English language science podcasts, but most of them are in this typical American style, a lot of blah, blah, and not that much content. Sorry, Americans. But you know the style, right? It's a bit different than maybe what Europeans perhaps typically do. And that's mostly what I listen to.
Well, maybe you're influenced, but in Software Engineering Radio, we strive to have a lot of content.
That is true. And I really do appreciate that. Of course, it's important when you do a podcast that the personalities behind the show become visible. And so small talk and emotions are important.
Marcus, thank you so much for letting Software Engineering Radio catch up with you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
My next guest is one of our hosts, Everhard Wolf. Everhard, welcome to Software Engineering Radio.
Thanks. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Everhard. Let's start out. Where do you live?
So I live in Berlin, Germany, the capital. Yeah, and that's also where I do most of my work.
And what type of work do you do?
So I'm a consultant and a trainer. So I consult people concerning software architecture and modern architecture approaches like NoSQL, cloud, and things like microservices, things of that nature.
And what else about your background would you like the listeners to know?
I have a pretty strong background in Spring, so I worked for Spring Source at one point, and I'm also a Java champion, so I do quite a lot of stuff concerning Java. I just wrote a book about continuous delivery in German, I'm afraid. So that's basically what I'm doing. And my goal concerning SE Radio is, well, to give people the opportunity to improve their skills concerning software engineering and architecture and have some fun doing so. So that's basically what I'm doing. And that's also why I'm writing a few articles, and I'm also at several conferences. I'm also at the program committee of some conferences. So that's how I try to sort of help others improve.
You've been with the show since very early on. Tell us how you got started with the show and what's it been like over a number of years now.
Yeah, so basically when Markus started the show, he asked me whether I wanted to join, and I really felt honored to do so. I enjoyed it quite a lot at that time, and did some nice shows about it. Markus was really the driving force behind the whole thing, and I'm quite thankful that he started the whole thing. Yeah, and it has always been a fun part, I think, and it has always been. Yeah, I'm quite surprised how much the team can actually put together and the quality of the whole thing. So that's why I enjoy it a lot.
Great. Thank you so much for everything you do for the show and for doing this interview.
Yeah, thank you for all the work that you're investing in the podcast.
My next guest is Charles Anderson.
In the interest of disclosure, I should say that Charles and I have been friends for many years, and he was one of the people that I reached out to join me as a host when I came on as editor. Let's start with, where do you live?
I live on a farm, actually, outside of Monmouth, Oregon, which is outside of Salem, Oregon, which is the state capital, and that's south of Portland, Oregon, which is sort of what most people know of in terms of Oregon. So depending on where I'm trying to get to in Portland, I may be an hour and a half away from Portland.
Okay, and that's the west coast of the United States for some of our international listeners. So tell the listeners about your background.
Sure. I studied computer science at the University of California at Berkeley. I worked in Silicon Valley and the greater Bay Area for about 10 years before I decided to go back to graduate school. I studied operations research in graduate school. That was again at the University of California at Berkeley, just because I was too lazy to apply anywhere else. And then sort of after that, I worked for several years here in Oregon at the Western Oregon University. I taught computer science at the undergraduate level. And then after some sort of life changes and whatnot, I decided to go back to software development because although I really like teaching, my real love is for software development.
You think your interest in teaching has any connection with doing podcasts?
Oh, certainly. I see it as a very similar sort of thing. If for no other reason than, they always say that to really get to know a topic, you need to explain it to someone else. And so, whereas I might have a passable level of interest and knowledge about a specific topic or something just for my own purposes, but if I'm going to go and teach it or discuss it on a podcast, I'm certainly going to dive into it much more deeply.
Sure. And you've talked about some of the areas that you studied. What are some of your technical interests besides operations research?
Let's see. I'm primarily what I would call a back-end or a systems programmer. I like to call it software without a face. So very much involved in things like databases, networking, scaling, and even, if you will, mundane things like build tools or testing frameworks. Again, that's things that people don't see. For very specific interests in the field, I've always been very attracted to operating systems, in particular file systems and databases.
How long have you been doing the show, and what has it been like being a show host?
Oh, sure. Yeah, as you mentioned, I started listening. I can't even remember when I started listening to Software Engineering Radio. It was many, many years ago. I think somebody on another podcast had mentioned it. And then I remember I told you about it and got you hooked on it. And next thing I know, you were a host and now the editor. For me, part of being on the show, I've certainly enjoyed the opportunity, like I mentioned before, to kind of dive into some topics a little more deeply than I otherwise would have. As you kind of hinted at, there is kind of a teaching aspect to podcasting that I enjoy. But then another part of it is kind of a giving back. I feel that over the years, I've certainly gained a lot of knowledge and information from podcasts, including Software Engineering Radio. And this is my opportunity to kind of give back. So I really enjoy that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking to the show.
Sure. Thanks.
My next guest is host Tobias Kotz. Tobias, welcome to Software Engineering Radio.
Thank you very much.
Where do you live?
Well, I live in the western part of Germany, near Cologne, which should be known by people around the world, but yeah, that's what I tell. But originally, I come from the eastern part of Germany, so I've got a bit of a culture clash here within the last 2 years. But it's great.
Tell the listeners about your background.
Well, my background is I studied computer science till 2009. And from then on, I worked in different positions, being a software engineer, project manager, an IT consultant. That's kind of my past, yeah.
And what do you do for work right now?
Right now, I'm working as a technical consultant for Recomind, a company that is based in San Francisco, and they are doing a lot of software engineering here in Rheinbach, near Cologne.
And what are some of your interests in the technology area?
Well, basically, it's everything around cloud technologies and big data, which is some things we had on the show as well, like microservices and things around that, and auto-scaling services and stuff like this. This is kind of amazing me and hugely impressed by the technologies that are out there.
And how has that been being a host? What's it been like?
It's a great experience because I never got to know so many people with different backgrounds and who are doing different technologies and inspiring technologies and have great ideas like Randy before. And it's a great chance of talking to so many great people. And I loved it. It's a lot more work than I thought it would be, but I enjoy it very much. And maybe my family sometimes doesn't, but I love it.
Great. Thank you very much, Tobias.
Thank you.
My guest now is Stefan Tilkov. Stefan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Robert.
The first questions I ask everyone are, where do you live and what do you do for work?
So I live in Germany, in the far west, in a very small town between Cologne and Düsseldorf. And I have a dual role. I am a consultant. I work in projects in the software architecture space. Typically doing workshops and on-site trainings and consulting work, as well as being the managing director of a consultancy itself. So I like to say that I spend about half of my time doing what I like and the other half doing what nobody wants to do, which is a bit of a lie, but sort of fits my interests pretty well.
And some of your main interests then would be what?
So software architecture in general is of huge interest to me because that's obviously a topic that comes up everywhere. I also have a long history with distributed computing topics. I used to do a lot of lots of various things, and with, for example, a remote procedure call disasters in all their various forms, as well as a lot of web services, which you could probably count as part of that. I also did a lot of work in the REST space. I actually authored a book in German, which I'm now happy to have a few co-authors for the third edition, which is coming out soon. And in the last few years, I've come to spend most of my time talking about and working with web technologies, not only for service use cases, but also for general application use cases in many different areas. So that's my main interest, web technology, and that's a wide space.
You are one of a small number of people who've been a guest on the show and a host. What's the difference?
Both are very interesting. I think most people in our industry like to hear themselves talk. I'm no exception. I like expressing my ideas and I love getting feedback to them. But I also really like talking to interesting people and just take a step back and just ask the questions. That's very interesting. I can, of course, learn a lot from the interviews or from the talks that I do because the guests are interesting to me personally. Otherwise, I would not want to talk to them. And of course, even as an interviewer, you can also steer the conversation to interesting directions and help express things, even if you do know something about the topic, which is not always the case, but sometimes it's really interesting to hear somebody else express ideas maybe in a different way or highlight different aspects of it. So I actually enjoy both, and I wouldn't say that I strongly favor one over the other.
When you went from outside to the inside, anything surprise you, not what you expected when you see how things work on the production of shows?
So one thing that I did not expect and that I found and still find very, very satisfying is that it's really a team effort. The hosts work together very well. There's lots of communication going on between the hosts as mediated by you, obviously, and that's not trying to gain favors with you here. I really enjoy the way that the hosts talk to each other because there's always a lot of feedback going on about the possible topics and the actual questions to ask. And people add their own ideas. This is something that I would find interesting. I didn't expect that. I was very positively surprised by that. I also think there's a lot more preparation in general going into the shows than is the case with many other podcasts, as far as I know, at least.
I'd like to give you a chance to mention your book. I know we have a lot of listening audience in the German language zone, so many of them might like to read it.
So it's called REST und HTTP, so REST and HTTP. It has had 2 editions already. The second one has been out of print for a while because we've been working on the third one for a long time now. And we're actually in the process of finishing it. So by the time you listen to this podcast, it might actually have been sent to the editor already. And it covers, obviously, REST, representation of state transfer, the architectural style of the web.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Stefan, for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me.
My next guest is Brian Brannon, who has a number of editorial responsibilities for IEEE Computer Society. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here, Robert.
Start with my standard question, where do you live?
I live in beautiful Huntington Beach, California, Surf City, USA.
And what is your job or jobs with IEEE?
Well, I have a few. I'm the lead editor for IEEE Software Magazine, which sponsors the SE Radio. I'm also lead editor for IEEE Computer Graphics and Applications and IEEE Internet Computing. I also do the multimedia. I'm the multimedia editor for Computer Magazine and IEEE Software, and then I'm staff managing editor for SE Radio.
For all the content you deal with, how does it break down roughly in a pie chart between different media types like print, online, text, audio, video?
It varies from week to week and day to day on just what's coming in, but from my own, if you broke it down on how much time I spend on each one, I'd say it's around, these days, maybe 40% print and then 60% multimedia to include SE Radio.
So tell us about your involvement with Software Engineering Radio, the podcast.
Sure. We were approached by Marcus Volter here at Software Magazine 2 or 3 years ago to take over publishing SE Radio. He had been doing it for many years, and just out of a labor of love, as did most of the or all of the people involved with it, And it just, I think, got to be too much. It's a lot of work, as you well know. And so he approached Software Magazine about us, taking over the administrative and editing responsibilities. And we were glad to do it because it fits really well with the subject matter of Software Magazine.
We have the show editors who, as under Marcus, are volunteers, and they record the shows. What are the steps that you're involved in taking a show from recorded to published?
Well, it depends on the host, but for the most part, go through and look at the audio levels and make sure that they're fairly balanced between the host and the guest so that one's not louder than the other, and do any edits that are necessary. Add bumpers at the front and back, size it so that it's not too big but still good enough quality, and go ahead and send it to iTunes and post it to the SC Radio homepage.
Great. So I thank you and your team for everything you do.
Glad to do it.
Talking now with Diomedes Spinellis. Diomedes, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
Where do you live, Diomedes?
I live in Athens, Greece. That's a wonderful country located by the Mediterranean Sea in southeastern Europe.
And you are part of the IEEE Computer Society. What is your role there?
I'm the editor-in-chief of IEEE Software, a magazine aiming computer practitioners, so trying to give practical advice from theory.
I believe many of our listeners have been with the show since before the show became part of IEEE Computer Society and may not be familiar with the Computer Society. Would you tell us a little bit about what that is and what its mission is, and why does it make sense for you to be a sponsor of the show?
Sure. The IEEE Computer Society is a professional body from IEEE. IEEE stands for Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. It's a professional association. It was formed a long time ago, combining the American Institute of Electrical Engineers with Institute of Radio Engineers, so you see where it comes from. And it's the largest association of technical professionals, so it has about 500,000 members from around the world. And its objectives are to advance the educational and technical advancement in engineering, computer engineering, telecommunications, and similar disciplines. So the Computer Society is part of the IEEE, which in turn wants to advance theory, practice, application of computer and IT, science and technology. And a major part of it is the professional standing of its members. It is the largest of the 38 technical societies that are part of the IEEE.
What is the relationship between the Computer Society and Software Engineering Radio, the podcast?
IEEE Computer Society sponsors workshops, conferences, and publishes a lot of peer-review literature, including the IEEE Software Magazine. The Software Engineering Radio is affiliated with IEEE Software because they share common views and objectives.
We've been talking now about the IEEE. I want to find out more about you. What is your job with IEEE? That's not your only job. You have at least one other job. Is that right?
Right. I'm a professor at the Department of Management Science and Technology at the Athens University of Economics and Business. There I teach software engineering, programming, the undergraduate course, and also have a postgraduate course on big data business analytics, where I teach engineering big data systems. I also do research on software engineering, mainly by using data from software repositories, from large software repositories, on big data engineering from the systems side, and on IT security.
Great. Well, thank you for that feedback, and thank you very much for speaking to the show. Was there anything else you wanted listeners to know before we wrap up?
No, thank you very much, Robert, for hosting me.
My next guest is Forrest Shawl. Forrest, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Robert. Great to be here.
Why don't you tell us about your regular job first?
That's a good one. Well, my regular job is I work for Carnegie Mellon University, and specifically for a institute within the university called the Software Engineering Institute. We're a federally funded research and development center. So a lot of what we do is work with industry, but mainly we work with government and primarily with the Department of Defense. Trying to help them with software acquisition, software development, any software-intensive system that they're building. Clearly, there's a role for us there. So a lot of what we do is, I always think of it as work in the public good, that we're trying to make sure that the taxpayer investment for the folks in the U.S. at least gets spent the right way, that we can help the Department of Defense and other government agencies build these incredibly sophisticated, in many cases, systems that they need to deal with the challenges of today.
And talk about your other job or roles that you've had with the IEEE Computer Society over a period of years.
Sure. Well, for the last 4 years, I was editor-in-chief of one of the publications that the Computer Society puts out, and that's IEEE Software. And to my mind, that was such a great experience because Software, the magazine, has this kind of unique mandate of being the bridge between research and practice. So a lot of what the content that we featured in the magazine was all these latest things that are coming out of the research and academic world, but conveyed in a sense in a way that's understandable for the practitioners that should be getting some value out of it.
You were there at the time and you were involved in the show becoming part of the magazine. Tell us the story of that.
Sure. Well, one of the things we did on the magazine was have an advisory board. So, we had a lot of kind of thought leaders from across industry, across the world. We were very globally focused. And because we wanted to make sure that the content we were featuring in the magazine was relevant, that we were hitting the right topics, that we weren't missing out on some hot topic that people in the software industry would need to know about. So one of those advisory board members was Marcus Volter, who was the original founder of SC Radio. And we happened to have him on the board at a time when he was looking to move on to new tasks. He had been doing SC Radio for a while. I won't even venture a guess. I don't remember how long he'd been doing it, but felt like he wanted to shake things up a little bit and try some new things for himself. But of course, he didn't want SC Radio to go away because it was such a wonderful resource for the community. So given that was his interest, one of the things that we were able to work out was a way by which the Computer Society and IEEE Software in particular kind of took over the responsibility for SC Radio. And Marcus moved off and some of the old team moved off. We were very happy that some of the team stayed on, and we've been trying to get some new voices, new folks on the team. And so we had a little bit of a transition period there where we were trying to make sure that things would work out well, and we were so desperately trying to keep the quality where Marcus had left it because he had bequeathed us such a wonderful resource. And so I always say, Robert, that I've been very happy when we got connected again with you and you kind of took up the mantle there and started to put the team together and put some more energy behind it, because I think that it's now we're moving along in a way that was very much simpatico with Marcus's original vision for it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking to the show, Forrest.
Oh, my pleasure.
My next guest is our newest host, Sven Johann. Sven, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Tell us, where do you live and what do you do for work?
I live in Amsterdam and I work for a company called Trifork. Trifork is mostly known for the GoTo and QCon conferences, but we also do all kinds of other things. For instance, lots of mobile development, but also Java, Spring, Elasticsearch consultancy.
How did you first learn about the podcast?
Yeah, I actually cannot remember when and where, but I think it was almost from the beginning in 2006 and 2007. And I was almost addicted. I listened to almost every show, and I used to travel a lot during that time. And for me, the software engineering radio was a perfect opportunity to learn about the latest and greatest new things just by listening in the train or in the plane. So for me, that was a big help and big fun.
So besides learning about new things, what else did you like about the show?
The most interesting thing about the show for me was the deep dive with, let's say, the famous people on a topic. One thing I can remember in particular was an interview with Martin Odersky on Scala. And I did a Scala course, I think, a couple of weeks before this interview. And a lot of things he said in this interview, you never hear about it if you take a course or if you read a book. Lots of the rationale behind things, why he did stuff like he did it in Scala. And I think that's in general an interesting thing about the show, that people talk about their technology or their method or you name it, but you can dive deep and ask questions which are probably not published elsewhere.
Okay, well, we're close to wrapping up. Is there anything else you would like the listeners to know about you?
I'm tending towards to say that I'm a bit addicted to these kind of things, like conferences and meetups and even something like software engineering radio, which helps people to learn or get new ideas. So for me, I think together with the conferences is software engineering radio really a nice opportunity to only help myself, but also do something good for other people.
And thank you for speaking to the program.
You're welcome.
My next guest is Jeff Meyerson. Jeff, welcome to Software Engineering Radio.
Thanks, Robert.
To start out, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
So I grew up in Austin, Texas, and I went to UT for computer science. Before that time, I spent some time in high school and early on in college playing a lot of poker. And then in college, after I studied computer science, I did some internships, and then now I'm just working full-time in the software industry.
And where do you work?
I work at Amazon right now.
How long have you been with the show, and what has it been like being a host?
I think I've been with the show for a year and a half or so at this point, maybe almost 2 years. And it's been really fun and interesting. It's been a good window into learning about technologies that are relevant in the industry in areas where I'm not currently working a lot of times. And you learn when you're doing episodes, you learn how to communicate with people about technical topics that you don't understand, which is definitely a valuable skill to develop, and it's a really fun way to develop it because you get to talk to people that really know what they're talking about, and you get to learn a lot.
How did you first find out about the show, and then how did that lead to becoming a host?
So I first started listening to the show when I would listen to podcasts on the way to work or when I was exercising, and I found it, I think, on the iTunes store, just looking, like I think I probably searched software or software engineering, and there are not a whole lot of good podcasts devoted to software, so it was pretty easy, find this one that was, there was high standards and high production value. So yeah, well, I mean, once I started listening to it, I didn't initially really know what a lot of the stuff they were talking about was, but it definitely taught me a lot, and then I got interested in it. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
How did that lead to you becoming a host on the show?
I think what led to me becoming a host was it was my last year of school, and I was starting to interview for a lot of jobs, and I liked podcasts a lot, and I guess maybe I started thinking about how I could get involved or how I could do my own podcast perhaps. And I would say that there are a lot of benefits to doing it, but I would say the biggest benefit that is maybe underappreciated is, I mean, first of all, if you're doing a podcast where you're interacting with anybody, then it gives you another social outlet. And software engineering radio is cool because we have a community of hosts that are really interesting and good to talk to. And then we also have, it gives you access and social credibility to talk to, people that are at the top of the industry. So yeah, what has driven me to it was the ability to socialize with people.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff.
My next guest is Johannes. Johannes, welcome to the show.
Hi.
My standard questions for everyone are, where do you live and what do you do for work?
So I live in Germany, right up in the north in Hamburg, and I do software consulting for a living. So I'm a software developer as on the one part, and on the other part, I try to help our client adopt Agile by showing them how a good Agile software developer does Agile in his day-to-day life, and kind of leading by example is our idea.
Is Agile process one of your main interests for the show?
It's definitely a part of it. So I'm very interested in giving Agile using Agile to make the software I deliver better, to better care to the end user's need. And I'm always interested in the practices which help improve the software engineering process. Especially retrospective are like my baby topic in there.
How did it come about that you became a host on the show?
So SE Radio was nearly the first podcast I listened to. And I really liked the format. So I created a podcast which was similar to SE Radio way back when I was still studying medical informatics. And yeah, this was for the students in my university, 1 hour interview podcast with professors and other students doing interesting PhD theses. And so when Marcus tweeted about looking for hosts, I thought, well, maybe I should now play with the big guys and start working with the real SE Radio after I stopped doing the stuff because I stopped studying.
You're involved in German language podcasts. I know you went to a conference about podcasting in Germany. What was that conference like?
So this German conference is the so-called Podlove podcasting workshop, which is so the Podlove stuff is something around WordPress to make podcasting easier. It was quite interesting because a lot of the German language podcasts came there and talked there. And in German, especially in Berlin, there is kind of a scene of people doing podcasts and referencing each other and going to each other's podcasts and all of that. Yeah, it's really interesting because people who do podcasts, especially people who do podcasts who are not interview podcasts, but they are like telling their own stories, maybe talking about their life because they're transsexual or because they have something else special they want to share with the community. They're quite outspoken. They have an opinion. They tell you something, and that's quite interesting.
Were you able to contribute anything from doing this show to the other people at the conference that would help them with their shows?
I actually gave a little session about how we do feedback in the preparation of an interview, and also how we do feedback afterwards, because I guess a lot of people don't get any feedback for what they're doing, especially if it's a small show which has only like 100 listeners. And I also showed like how our process is and how we, because we are 10 hosts and we have the luxury of at least those 10 hosts very closely looking at what you have been doing and how you could improve what you're doing from a perspective of having done an interview as well.
When you're doing an interview, what is it that you're trying to bring to the listeners? What would you want them to take away from having listened to one of your shows?
So the idea for me is you get an overview, like maybe not a 10,000 foot overview, but a 1,000 foot overview of the topic, that you know kind of, okay, microservice is this and that. So you split up into small services, and a few people have tried it successfully, and you have ideas what it could mean, and you also have the Google search terms in mind when you really want to use it in your project. To me, listening to podcasts is really good at building knowledge, like a general knowledge. You're not getting an expert by listening to a podcast, but you have heard everything already, and when you ever need it in your project, you're prepared for that.
Yeah, I get that. It's like having signposts to what's going on in the world of software and where you might want to go next. Are you involved in any other blogs, conferences, books, anything you'd like the listeners to follow up with?
I have a blog, which is jtunis.net, which I should do more often, but I didn't get to it because I was doing so much with podcasts last year. I also have a podcast called Der Alltägliche, which is a German language podcast, and we do all kinds of stuff on how to improve yourself, your working or your organization, kind of business topics, but also very psychologic in recent times. You could follow up on that or find me on Twitter.
What's your favorite podcast that you listen to other than Software Engineering Radio?
There is one very, very good German podcast called Alternativlos, which is two guys talking about politically/technical topics, very detailed with a lot of experience. Unfortunately, they really, really rarely publish. So Hanselman is a good one, which has kind of the same topic than we have in English. or if you want to listen to some German guys trying to podcast in English, you could listen to News of the World, News with a Z, which is a show about what is going on in the world, which the news are not reporting on, kind of.
Great. Well, thank you, Johannes, for being on the show.
Thanks.
My next guest on the show is Josh Long. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
One of my standard questions is, where do you live? But I'm going to answer that. You live in San Francisco, pretty close to me. And my other standard question is, what do you do for work?
I am the developer advocate for the open source Spring technologies at Pivotal.
So I was going to ask you, with all of the other media and outreach you do as part of your job, what's different for you about podcasting, and why did you want to add that to your repertory?
So podcasting, specifically as it concerns SE Radio, not generally, obviously, SE Radio is this incredible opportunity to connect with people that I tend to bump into a lot anyway. And it's just a great place to sort of have those discussions and have an exercise to have those, have some sort of framework to have those discussions with really interesting people. I've been very lucky. I get to talk to a lot of interesting people, and I feel like if I could just share those people and those discussions with others, I think that's actually very useful. And SE Radio shares a lot of interesting discussions with me, in that I get to listen to it, and I get to spend an hour with all these really great minds and personalities. So now I feel like it'd just be nice to share my, whatever I can offer back, I would like to.
And when you do a show, what is it you're trying to bring to the listeners with each show?
I want listeners to feel that giddy sense of inspiration that I get when I listen to some of these really amazing people. And as you know, you and I have had these discussions around one particular show, and that is actually something that was driven out of turmoil, or I suppose you could even call it politics. And that's another thing I would like to be able to that's a nut I'd like to be able to crack open, and share with others, is to provide that backstage access to certain events in the industry. And this gives me, again, that's another framework to do it.
Great, Josh. Well, thanks for being on the show, and thanks for doing shows.
Thank you very, very much for having me. I'm truly honored. Listeners may not know, but I've just started this journey on SE Radio. So, yeah, I'm honored. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for listening to SE Radio, an educational program brought to you by IEEE Software Magazine. For more information about the podcast, including other episodes, visit our website at se-radio.net. To provide feedback, you can write comments on each episode on the website or write a review on iTunes. Mention or message us on Twitter at SE Radio, or search for the Software Engineering Radio Group on LinkedIn, Google+, or Facebook. You can also email us at team@se-radio.net. This and all other episodes of SE Radio is licensed under the Creative Commons 2.5 license. Thanks again for your support.